Shabbat Shalom. So I have found that there are two different types of households, both trying to achieve the same objective, but in diametrically opposed ways. Household number one, you sit down for the family meal, and it is wonderful and scrumptious, and you have cleaned your plate, and Grandma reaches over, picks up the spoon, and puts more on your plate. And you finish that. And then she picks up and puts more on your plate. And at this point, you're getting a little stuffed, so you eat, but you stop cleaning your plate. Because if you don't, you're never getting up from that table. And to clean your plate would be an insult to the cook. Because that would mean that the cook had not prepared enough, that you had left the table with some inch of gap in your stomach, that you might still be hungry, and therefore they have let you down. Household number two. You come to that house and you sit and you eat the family meal together, and at the end of the meal, having served yourself 3 or 4 extra helpings of the wonderful food, you're finally stuffed, and you leave a little bit on the edge of the plate. Boy, are you in trouble. You are wasting food. How dare you take food and not eat it? I discovered this diametrically opposed attitude because my wife and I were both raised in one of the two different households. And I'll tell you, we had to work out which way we were going to handle it in our home. You clean your plate in our home. I was raised where if there's anything left, if there's nothing left on the plate, you must have gone with short, and therefore more would be added. But both of these are working through from different points, usually from families that have gone through different experiences and hardships, whether it be the Great Depression, whether it be the rationing of World War II, or other times of struggle where food was in short supply. And some families come with the idea that if food was in short supply once, thank God now it's not in short supply, and I will make sure that you are well fed and satiated. And other families who went through the same experience, by God, if food was short once, I will not waste a single crumb of food to show that I appreciate the blessings that I now enjoy, knowing that I could have more, but there's no way I would ever waste. Both essentially from the same core values, which might make us very confused by one of the laws, the halachot, of the laws of Shemitah. We talked about the sabbatical year coming from the word Shabbat, where the land is allowed to lie fallow. You might have noticed, if you were a careful reader, which we all aim to be, that it's not just that the land lies fallow and that we don't tend to our crops, but we are allowed to harvest what grows naturally. But harvest is perhaps the wrong word. We are allowed to gather as we need, what we need, from what is growing. But crucially, that land, the back 40 acres that are attached to our farm during the sabbatical year do not belong to us. They are ownerless during that year. That doesn't mean someone can come build a house, don't worry. But it does mean that anybody who wants can walk through your field and grab a cucumber that's growing wild in that 7th year. You didn't plant it. You're not allowed to harvest all the cucumbers. And you're not allowed to chase them away for daring to eat from your field, because it's not your field during that 7th year. But then we take it one step further. One step further, that not only can you not shoo away other people, but if you notice very carefully, it is also food for the beasts of the field. If some raccoon comes by and wants to eat that cucumber, you don't get to go out and go, shoo, get out of here, you trash panda. You just have to sit and watch as they eat. Well, it's not my food, is it? That is the whole point of the sabbatical year. Yes, it is growing wild on my property, and yes, under normal circumstances, I would be perfectly allowed to ensure that I could harvest the majority of my crops, although there are special rules for what we leave behind for those that do not have enough, the corners of the fields, the gleanings of the fields, the forgotten sheaves. There are many ways that we do try to help others, even in regular years. But during that sabbatical year, even the animals get equal right to what is growing in that field. Everybody with me so far? All right, because now here comes the hard part. Because animals have equal right to that field, they then become a benchmark for how we relate to what is growing in the field. Specifically, as long as they can still eat it, you can still eat it. What does that mean in practice? And this may be hard to understand for people that are used to getting their fruit and veg from Publix, which brings it from all over the world. It means once it goes out of season, once those cucumbers are no longer out there anymore, meaning no longer available for the raccoons, any cucumbers you still have in your house are thrown away. If they can't have it, you can't have it. Well, trust me, you'll definitely see the raccoons going through your trash to get those extra cucumbers that you have thrown out, but it is specifically pegged to whether they are in season. So rationing your cucumbers so that you can share them with the occasional friendly raccoon. They're never friendly, as our president can testify to, and his wonderful story of the great battle of the backyard. It doesn't matter that you are feeding that raccoon, or 10 raccoons, or 100 raccoons, because you are not able to provide free access for every animal of the field. It has to be 100% available to everything that crawls, flies, or slithers. And that means once it is out of season, once it's no longer growing in that field, anything that you happen to have gathered is now no longer available to you because it's not available to them. All right. Now, if you're thinking I'm crazy, well, first of all, I didn't make this up. God did. Secondly, if you think this is crazy, then you might be having trouble understanding the entire point of the sabbatical year, which is why this example is such a beautiful issue to help drive home how differently God wanted us to think about the world than how we normally do. And don't feel bad. Our ancestors had trouble with this as well. It is precisely because they neglected the sabbatical year that we were exiled for 70 years, making up for the 7 times 7 times that we were failing to keep the sabbatical year because people were not comfortable with this idea. But we understand why you're not comfortable. I mean, first of all, it's a hard ask. Right? 7th year, you're not sowing your crops. What am I going to eat? Well, you're going to eat the crops from year number 6. All right, that's all very well and good. I probably will have left over. It seems like God is planning to guarantee this. But how do I know that when I replant in year 8 and then harvest at the end of that agricultural cycle, that I will still have leftover from year 6? You know, it just seems like I'm risking an awful lot here. This is my life. This field is not just a hobby of my garden in the backyard. This field is everything. Without this, I and my family die. And the Torah says, that's right. Without it, you die. Understand that. And where did the field come from that you are using to sustain yourself? Did you make it with your own hands? You might have pulled out the stones. You might have plowed it. You might have made a fence. You might have even improved the irrigation. But did you make the earth? You did not. God made the earth. And if God gives you an instruction on how to use your borrowed property from God, then yes, that's what you do. Because this is part of understanding the relationship between us and God. God is not some distant force. God is imbued within this entire universe, and God is a passenger in our lives. And if God says turn left at the next fork, you turn left at the next fork, because it's God's car and it's God's road. How would you say no? Borrow a car from someone, and when they tell you what to do with it, tell them, nah, it's my car now. I'm pretty sure they're going to have problems with that attitude. Now, why would God do this? Is it just to teach us to have trust and to have faith? No, not only. Like every other mitzvah, every other commandment, there are multiple layers here. This is also meant to teach us the fragility of what we have. We often think that we are sustained by our own efforts. And indeed, our own efforts are critical, central in Judaism. We do not expect to simply sit on our porch and watch everything grow and know that God will provide. We're out there with the plow, we are working, and we are pushing ourselves to the limit to make sure that there is enough for ourselves, our families, and our community. But as hard as we push, we also know that there is an element that is beyond our control. Whether it be the rains, whether it be the vagaries of national conflict that could lead to a war and now some army runs through and takes my crops or burns it to the ground, whether it be a plague of locusts or some other calamity, there are things I cannot control. In the modern world, we've gotten better at controlling many, but there are still things beyond our control. And we have to remember that, even as we work within our sphere of influence. But is that all this mitzvah gives us? No. It also reminds us of the fragility for those that do not even have a dependable field to try and sustain themselves. When you look out at that field and you know that it belongs to no one, and you know you can't just harvest up and store everything and have a huge warehouse full of the food that will last you, but instead you'll go out each and every day during that sabbatical year, well, welcome to the life of the poor, who worry each and every day that there'll be enough for them to eat, that they will have made enough hiring themselves out as a laborer, that they will have made enough to scrape together just enough to live. Find a few sheaves that were left by a kind farmer, maybe able to find some wild acorns. Well, for a year, you get to understand what it's like for them who live that way, not just 1 out of 7 years, but every year out of 7. And maybe the next time you are working in your field, you will feel kinder to them when you hire them as a spare laborer. Maybe you will give them a little more to sustain them. Maybe you will help them find their own field and build them up. Because for this 1 every 7th year, you'll appreciate, you will have sympathy for their condition. And you would not wish that upon anyone. And maybe you will also have sympathy for the land itself. It is the thing we take most for granted. After all, it's just the dirt beneath our feet. The land seems infinite, both in its size compared to the average human, as well in its productivity throughout eternity. We've been farming on this earth for 10,000 years at least that we know of. Surely the earth will never fail us. Surely the earth will always have more to give. God created this world in such a way that there is a cycle to replenish the nutrients and all that is needed to come from the earth to sustain us. That could never break. Certainly does, says God. Exhaust the land and it will cease to yield its produce to you. It'll turn hard and dead. And then, where will you be? If you are trusting only in your own efforts, imagining that what you are draining is bottomless, eventually you will find that your efforts have exhausted it and you will have nothing else to sustain yourself with. This myth of self-sufficiency is predicated on a belief of the infinite availability of resources to support me. And that doesn't work. But even if it did in your lifetime, because you lived in the ancient world and you had perhaps a shorter lifetime than average, what about your children, your grandchildren? What will be left from the earth that you have drained through your greed and your anxiety and your paranoia? What will be left for them? God tells us that we are blessed to live in a position of preeminence within the world. We are conscious, we are sentient, we are moral creatures. We can see our life unfolding around us in a way that no other animal can. But that means we also have an obligation to those that come later. Because the world is not infinite only for me. The world is infinite when sustained for all of us and for all the creatures that happen to wander through my yard. But that requires proper management. That requires us to be a partner with God in creation. It requires us to understand our position as renters on God's world. But renters who have been given this responsibility. Those that have must share. Those that do not must help and work, but also be stewards of the land. And all of us have an obligation to the land as well as every other creature that inhabits it. The Torah was written 3,000 years ago, before modern consumerism, before the idea that life is best when you are able to consume the most became a normal platitude. And yet we need it more now than ever. But we are so far removed from these farms, we are so far removed from seeing the bounty, the growth, the beauty of the world around us, that it's hard for us to even imagine this concept that I am sharing. We're very fortunate here in Orlando, specifically here at the TI campus, Temple Israel, because we have a lovely tree out there that many of our religious school students know, our loquat tree. You guys remember the loquat tree out there? Exactly. If you don't know what a loquat is, they don't ship well, so you're not going to find them in the supermarket, except for a few of the local Asian markets might have them, because they're willing to put in the extra effort of procuring them because they taste good, but they have a fairly narrow season. But when that blossoms and puts out its yellow fruit, it is amazing. But to our students, does anybody remember this year going out to the loquat tree like we normally do? Nope. We didn't get to go out to the tree this year. Why? Because we had those heavy frosts. Just as the loquat tree was beginning to blossom and bud, those heavy freezes came through and wiped out almost all of the fruit. I was able to get a couple that were, okay, but the fruit had maybe 2% of what it would normally have been, and about 2% of the flavor of what it would have normally have been. How fragile is our world? How fragile is our place? And how important it is the Torah doesn't tell us to take that fragility, to take that anxiety, and to turn it into fear or to turn it into greed. But instead to recognize that that fragility is simply a condition of life, but it is one that together we can overcome. If we are willing to moderate ourselves, if we are willing to moderate our communities, there will always be enough. But it only works if we turn from fear and embrace generosity. If we turn from paranoia and allow ourselves to feel open and vulnerable, but know that we are secure and safe in the hands of God and in the hands of each other. We'll get through it if we allow ourselves. And on the contrary, if you still think I'm crazy, if you still think the Torah is completely naive and idealistic and nobody would ever live like that, don't be surprised at the world you get. Shabbat Shalom.